The Galactic Council marked Sol-3 as a Class 10 death world. They said the air was poison, the gravity was a crusher, and the weather was a weapon. Captain Xyloth thought it was a lie to hide a treasure. He was wrong. He didn't know that the deadliest thing on the planet wasn't the storms or the gravity, it was the locals who drink poison for breakfast. The pirate spaceship, known as the Void Runner, moved silently through the dark edges of the galaxy. It was an ugly ship, covered in scars from many battles and rusty patches on its hull. Inside the command bridge, the air was warm and smelled of old oil. Captain Xyloth sat in his large metal chair, tapping his sharp claws on the armrest. He was a tall, thin alien with green scales and yellow eyes that looked like a snake's eyes. He was bored. To a space pirate, boredom was the worst thing in the universe. He wanted action, and more importantly, he wanted treasure. His pilot, a smaller and more nervous alien named Glip, turned away from the control panel. Glip's hands were shaking as he pointed to the view screen. In front of them, a small yellow sun burned brightly. Orbiting this sun was a blue and green planet. It looked peaceful and beautiful, swirling with white clouds. However, the ship's computer was flashing a bright red light. Xyloth leaned forward, his interest piqued. Usually, red lights meant danger, and danger usually meant there was something valuable worth stealing. The computer screen displayed a message from the Galactic Council database. It was a high-level security warning. The text was simple but terrifying to most species, Sol-3. Class 10 Death World. Do not approach. Xyloth read the data file. It claimed that the planet had crushing gravity, 3 times stronger than the galactic standard. It said the atmosphere was full of oxygen, a gas that caused metal to rust and cells to age rapidly. It also mentioned unpredictable water storms and extreme temperature changes. The Council had marked this entire sector as a forbidden zone. Captain Xyloth laughed, a dry and rasping sound that echoed in the quiet bridge. He did not believe the warning. He thought the Galactic Council was full of cowards and liars. In his experience, when the Council put a death world warning on a planet, it was because they wanted to keep it for themselves. He was convinced that the blue planet was hiding a secret base, or perhaps it was a storage vault for gold and rare technology. He looked at the peaceful blue marble and decided that no planet that looked so pretty could actually be dangerous. He ordered the crew to ignore the warning buoys and set a course for the surface. The crew was terrified. They looked at the gravity readings and whispered to each other. Glip tried to tell the captain that their engines might not be strong enough to leave the planet once they landed. Xyloth hissed loudly and slammed his fist on the console. He threatened to throw anyone who disobeyed him out of the airlock. Fear of the captain was stronger than fear of the planet, so Glip pushed the throttle forward. The engines roared to life, and the ship sped toward Earth. As soon as the Void Runner touched the outer layer of Earth's atmosphere, everything went wrong. The ship did not glide, it slammed into the air as if it had hit a brick wall. The vessel began to shake violently. The metal frame groaned and screeched under the pressure. Alarms started blaring loudly, drowning out the crew's screams. The thick air of Sol-3 grabbed the ship and pulled it down with incredible force. Xyloth held onto his chair, his eyes wide with sudden panic. The peaceful blue sky turned into a raging fire around the windows. They were not landing, they were falling. The arrogant captain realized too late that the warning was real. The crash was not graceful. The Void Runner tore through the canopy of a dense forest, snapping massive pine trees like they were dry twigs. Metal screamed against wood and stone as the ship carved a deep trench into the dark, wet earth. When the vessel finally came to a halt, the silence that followed was heavy and terrifying. The ship was tilted on its side, smoke pouring from the shattered engines. Inside the bridge, the emergency lights flickered with a weak orange glow, casting long, scary shadows on the walls. Captain Xyloth groaned and tried to stand up, but immediately, he felt something was wrong. It felt as if an invisible giant was sitting on his chest. He pushed against the floor with his arms, but his muscles trembled and burned with effort. On his home planet, Xyloth could jump high into the air and run with incredible speed. Here, simply lifting his head felt like lifting a heavy boulder. He looked around and saw his crew members crawling on the floor. They were dragging themselves slowly, gasping for breath. The gravity of Sol-3 was not just a number on a screen, it was a physical cage. Every movement required maximum energy. Xyloth realized with horror that his bones felt brittle under the immense weight of this world. He managed to pull himself into a sitting position, his heart pounding hard against his ribs as it struggled to pump blood in this heavy environment. The ship's computer was dead, but the manual release for the airlock still worked. Xyloth knew they had to get out before the fuel tanks exploded. He barked a weak order to Glip, and together they pulled the heavy lever. The door hissed and fell open. Immediately, the atmosphere of Sol-3 rushed into the ship. It was thick and heavy, carrying the scent of damp soil, pine needles, and something sharp. Xyloth's suit sensors started beeping wildly. The air was 21% oxygen. To the crew, oxygen was a corrosive gas used to melt rust off old ship parts. Breathing this air unprotected would burn their lungs over time, but they had no choice. They activated their filtration masks and stumbled out into the alien world. They fell from the airlock and hit the ground hard. The dirt here was soft and wet, covering their uniforms in mud. Xyloth looked up, and his blood ran cold. The vegetation on this planet was monstrous. The trees were hundreds of feet tall, thick pillars of rough bark that blocked out the sky. They looked like ancient wooden soldiers standing guard. The forest was dark and shadowed, and the air was filled with a loud, rushing sound. It was the wind. On Xyloth's world, the wind was a gentle breeze. Here, it howled through the branches, shaking the massive trees. The sheer power of the weather was frightening. As the crew huddled together near the wreckage, the temperature began to drop. The sun was setting, and the friendly blue sky turned a bruised purple and black. Xyloth watched his breath form a white cloud in the air. He realized that the planet was actively trying to kill them. The gravity wanted to crush them, the air wanted to rust them, and the cold wanted to freeze them. The arrogance he felt in space was gone. Now, standing in the mud under the towering trees of Sol-3, the captain felt small and weak. He understood why the Galactic Council had placed a warning here. This was not a place for living things, this was a graveyard. The crew huddled together near the warm engine of their crashed ship, trying to stop their bodies from shaking. The forest was pitch black now, but it was not silent. Strange noises echoed from the darkness, clicks, hoots, and the rustling of dry leaves. Every sound made the aliens jump. They were apex predators in space, but here, on this high-gravity rock, they felt like prey. Glip held a plasma pistol with both hands, but the weapon felt incredibly heavy. His arms were tired just from holding it up. Suddenly, the noises in the forest stopped. A heavy silence fell over the area, the kind of silence that happens when a king enters the room. Then, they heard the snapping of wood. Something massive was moving through the bushes. It did not sneak, it walked with power and confidence. The ground vibrated slightly with each step. Xyloth squinted his yellow eyes into the shadows. Two small, reflective eyes stared back at him. Then, the creature stepped into the dim light of the ship's emergency fires. The aliens gasped in horror. It was a quadruped, a four-legged beast of nightmare proportions. It was covered in thick brown fur that looked like matted armor. Its muscles were so large they rippled under its skin with every movement. To the fragile aliens, this creature looked like a biological tank designed for war. It was a grizzly bear, but to Xyloth, it was a monster. The beast sniffed the air, smelling the alien fuel and the strange scent of the crew. It let out a low growl that was so deep it rattled Xyloth's teeth. The sound was a frequency of pure aggression. Panic took over the crew. Glip screamed and pulled the trigger of his plasma pistol. A bolt of superheated green energy shot out and hit the bear in the shoulder. On any other world, this weapon would have burned a hole through steel. But on Sol-3, the creatures were built differently. The plasma bolt burned the thick fur and scorched the skin, but it did not kill the beast. It only made it angry. The bear roared, a sound so loud it felt like a physical blow to the alien's sensitive ears. The monster charged. It moved with terrifying speed for something so large. The high gravity of Earth did not seem to slow it down at all. In fact, the creature seemed perfectly adapted to it. Xyloth tried to dodge, but his legs were too slow and heavy. The bear swung a massive paw. The blow hit Xyloth with the force of a hydraulic press. He was thrown backward through the air, crashing into the metal hull of his ship. His armor cracked, and he fell into the mud, gasping for air. He could not believe the raw power of this animal. It had swatted him aside as if he were nothing more than a nuisance. The rest of the crew froze, too terrified to move. The bear stood on its hind legs, towering over them like a giant. It was 10 feet tall, a wall of muscle and rage. Its claws were as long as knives, and its mouth was full of bone-crushing teeth. Xyloth looked up from the mud, his vision blurry. He realized now why the Galactic Council never came here. Evolution on this planet was an arms race. To survive the crushing gravity and the poison air, the life forms here had become unkillable monsters. The bear lowered itself back down and prepared to finish them off. The aliens closed their eyes, waiting for the end, knowing they were powerless against a creature forged in the hell of Sol-3. Just as the massive bear raised its claws to destroy the crew, a loud crack filled the air. It sounded like a sudden clap of thunder, sharp and violent. The noise echoed through the wet forest, causing the aliens to cover their sensitive ears in pain. To their shock, the terrifying beast stopped immediately. The bear, which had shrugged off a plasma bolt, suddenly looked frightened. It dropped to all four legs, whined like a scared puppy, and turned around. It ran away into the darkness, crashing through the bushes in a desperate panic. The aliens were left lying in the mud, confused and trembling. They looked at each other with wide eyes. What kind of creature could possibly scare away a monster like that? If the bear was the tank of this world, what was coming next? A beam of bright, artificial light cut through the rain, blinding Captain Xyloth. Heavy footsteps approached, crunching loudly on the gravel and twigs. The steps were rhythmic and calm, shaking the ground slightly near the aliens' heads. From the shadows, a figure emerged. It was a biped, walking on two legs. It was tall, standing even higher than the bear had. However, to Xyloth's confusion, the creature looked incredibly soft. It had no fur to protect it from the freezing cold, only layers of artificial skins made of yellow fabric. It had no visible claws, no tail for balance, and a flat face with small, dull teeth. It looked like the weakest thing on the planet, a creature that should have died minutes after being born. Despite its soft appearance, the creature was doing the impossible. It was walking upright in the crushing gravity with zero effort. It was not hunching over or struggling to breathe the thick air. It moved with a casual confidence that terrified the aliens more than the bear's rage. The creature was not wearing a pressure suit or a helmet. Its face was completely exposed to the toxic oxygen and the freezing rain. Water dripped down its skin, but it did not melt or burn. It simply wiped the liquid away with a gloved hand. Xyloth realized that this soft-looking skin must be a camouflage for an indestructible hide underneath. This creature didn't need armor because the environment simply couldn't hurt it. The creature stopped a few feet away and looked down at them. It held a long wooden and metal stick in one hand and the blinding light in the other. It opened its mouth and made a sound. It was a shout, likely intended to be a greeting, but to the aliens, it was a sonic attack. The density of Earth's atmosphere made sound waves travel with painful intensity. The creature's voice boomed like a cannon blast, vibrating inside Xyloth's skull. The captain clutched his head, feeling dizzy from the sheer volume. The creature seemed to realize they were in distress, but its version of gentle was still overwhelming to the fragile visitors. The human, a park ranger named Dave, did not see terrifying space pirates. He saw a group of weird-looking animals, or perhaps lost children in very elaborate costumes, huddled in the mud. He lowered his rifle, thinking there was no threat. He leaned down, his massive face coming closer to Xyloth. To the captain, this was the face of death. The human reached out a hand, likely to check for injuries. The hand was enormous, with 5 thick, crushing digits. Xyloth tried to crawl backward, his heart failing him. The bear had run away from this thing. The bear knew better. The aliens realized they were now face to face with the planet's true master, a being that walked through hell as if it were a walk in the park. Captain Xyloth knew he had to fight for his life. He was a proud pirate, and he refused to die in the mud without a struggle. With a burst of desperate energy, he reached for his belt and pulled out a backup weapon. It was a kinetic dagger, a blade made of space-hardened alloy that vibrated at a high frequency to cut through steel. He screamed a war cry, though in the thick air, it sounded like a squeak. He lunged at the giant human, aiming for the creature's soft-looking leg. He expected the blade to slice through the yellow fabric and bring the giant down. Instead, the attack ended before it truly began. The human, Dave, reacted with impossible speed. He did not dodge or panic. He simply reached down and caught Xyloth's wrist in midair. To the captain, it felt like his arm had been caught in a hydraulic clamp. The human's grip was made of iron. Dave looked at the vibrating knife with curiosity, thinking it was perhaps a broken piece of the ship or a dangerous toy. He gently took the weapon from Xyloth's hand. Xyloth tried to pull back, but he was powerless against the human's grip strength. Dave inspected the blade, frowned, and then bent it in half with his thumb. The alien alloy snapped like a dry twig. Xyloth stared in absolute horror. The human had just destroyed military-grade metal with his bare fingers. Then, the monster did something even more terrifying. He reached into his coat and pulled out a silver metal cylinder. He unscrewed the top, and a cloud of white steam rose into the cold air. The alien suit sensors immediately flashed red warnings. The liquid inside the container was nearly 100 degrees Celsius. On Xyloth's world, water at that temperature was used to sterilize medical equipment. It would boil flesh instantly. The human brought the cup to his lips and drank the boiling black liquid without flinching. He even made a sound of satisfaction. Xyloth's scanner analyzed the chemical composition of the black liquid. The results made his blood freeze. It was a mixture of heated water and a complex chemical called caffeine. To the alien species, caffeine was a Class A neurotoxin. It was a poison used to overstimulate the nervous system until the heart exploded. This human was not just drinking boiling water, he was drinking poison for fun. The creature was intentionally ingesting toxins to make himself more alert. Xyloth realized they were dealing with a biological impossible. This species drank poison, broke metal with their hands, and scared away bears. There was no way to fight something like this. The human seemed to decide that playtime was over. He reached down and grabbed Xyloth by the back of his spacesuit. With a single casual motion, Dave lifted the captain completely off the ground. He held Xyloth in the air with one arm, as easily as if the alien were a stuffed doll. Dave grabbed Glip with his other hand. He began to walk through the forest, carrying the pirates like groceries. The human stride was long and bouncy, ignoring the gravity that was crushing the aliens. Xyloth dangled helplessly, watching the ground pass beneath him. He knew they were being taken to the creature's lair. He closed his eyes, praying that the human would eat them quickly rather than torture them with more of that boiling poison. The human carried the paralyzed aliens into his wooden fortress, a structure that smelled of dead trees and chemicals. He placed them gently on a high wooden platform, which Xyloth assumed was a preparation table for their execution. The room was unbearably hot, heated by a metal box in the corner that contained a trapped fire. On the walls, there were skulls of other animals mounted as trophies, proving that this species hunted for sport. The human removed his outer layer of yellow skin, revealing a soft, fabric layer underneath. He sat down opposite them and did something that made the aliens retch in disgust. He began to consume solid matter. He picked up a square object, unhinged his jaw slightly, and bit into it, tearing it apart with his blunt teeth. Seeing the alien staring, the human, Dave, pushed a piece of his food toward them. He made a soft, encouraging noise, thinking the poor creatures were hungry. Xyloth frantically activated his wrist scanner to analyze the substance. The results were terrifying. The object was a biological weapon. The outer layers were made of ground grains infected with a living fungus known as yeast. Inside, there was a slab of meat from a dead animal, covered in a yellow paste made from solidified, fermented bovine secretions teeming with millions of live bacteria. To top it off, the human had added a red sauce that was highly acidic. The human was offering them a sandwich, but to Xyloth, it was a lethal dose of fungus, bacteria, and acid. The captain realized that human stomachs must be vats of concentrated hydrochloric acid to digest such horrors. Suddenly, the human stood up and walked into another room. The sound of running water echoed through the wooden walls. Xyloth knew this was their only chance. Adrenaline spiked through his system, giving him a temporary burst of strength against the crushing gravity. He signaled to Glip, and together they rolled off the table, hitting the wooden floor with a heavy thud. They crawled desperately toward a window that had been left slightly open. Every inch was a struggle. Their muscles burned, and their hearts raced. Xyloth managed to jam his fingers under the window frame and pushed upward. It slid open. They tumbled out into the wet, freezing night, landing back in the mud of the death world. They did not look back. They scrambled on all fours through the bushes, ignoring the pain in their limbs. The Void Runner was still smoking in the trench, but the airlock was open. They threw themselves inside and slammed the button to seal the door. As the airlock pressurized, flushing out the toxic oxygen and replacing it with their own safe air, Xyloth collapsed at the helm. He didn't bother with safety checks. He slammed his fist onto the ignition sequence. The engines whined in protest, struggling against the thick atmosphere. The ship shook violently as it clawed its way into the sky, fighting the planet's gravity every meter of the way. They broke through the clouds, and finally, the black silence of space greeted them. They were safe. Once they were far away from the solar system, Captain Xyloth sat down to write his final report to the Galactic Council. His hands were still shaking as he typed the data. He deleted the old warning and wrote a new, urgent entry. He described a world where the gravity crushed metal, the air rusted ships, and the dominant species was a nightmare. He wrote that humans drank neurotoxins for energy, ate bacteria for fun, and treated apex predators like house cats. He concluded the file with a simple, terrifying statement for any future traveler: Sol-3 is not a planet, it is a prison for the universe's most dangerous biology. If you see a human, do not fight. Do not run. Just pray. Never land.